Hello and welcome to the North American Guitar Showroom in London. It's a very exciting talking guitar session today. I'm here with one of my dearest friends, Mr. John Stubbings. How are you?
Very good, Ben. Very good.
So John is a client of ours and a customer, and also just you love coming down to the showroom, playing the guitars, talking guitar. But that's not the reason why we're here.
Oh no.
No. So we've been discussing about coming in to do an interview for quite some time to talk about the launch and publication of The Devil Is In It. Now, I've just finished reading this book, and I have to say, and this is a proof, I have to say that it is not only historical, it is hilarious, and
hysterical even.
It was hysterical, yeah. And it's just, it must be very difficult to take on such a big challenge of writing a novel, but also something that has so much history attached to it, the guitar. But for me personally, obviously knowing you, reading this, I was laughing out loud on the train.
In a good way.
In a very, very good way. So, tell us a little bit more about the book, the journey.
Well, I'm glad you enjoy it, which is great. It's been about 5 years in the production, and that wasn't the original plan, because I sort of started out writing a sort of much simpler book. I wanted to write a book about the making of a bespoke or boutique guitar, and it happened to be a guitar that didn't have a very easy coming into the world. In fact, it took rather a long time. I would hasten to say it wasn't made by one of TNAG's luthiers, although I have guitars made by your excellent luthiers, some very nice ones. But I was sort of midway through having this guitar made, and I sort of thought I'd quite like to write the story of this, because not just from the luthier's point of view, but also from the customer's point of view. What sort of goes on in our minds when you get to a point of saying, you know something, I need something special. I need something that's been made just for me. And I suppose at that point, as a lot of your viewers and customers will know, at the stage where you decide you want something special, you're probably quite a long way into the process of either guitar obsession or guitar acquisition syndrome, whatever you want to call it. Very few people say, that would be my first guitar then, and I'll have a Jason Cossell or a Greenfield. Yeah. You've normally got quite a history. And so I started writing that book. It was meant to be a sort of a tragic comedy of the misadventures, if you like, of making this particular guitar, which took 10 years.
And there are some absolutely hilarious parts about that journey.
And that sort of was, as I said, what I started writing. But then I got to talking to other collectors, and I began to sort of understand something about guitar obsession. And of course, there's all the regular stories of the guy who dies and his wife rings up the guitar store and says, "Oh, can you come down, and I want to sell the half dozen great guitars he's got, and I want to give the money to a music charity for local kids." And the guys go down and they look at the 6 guitars, and they are indeed very nice guitars, but they know that this guy has actually bought 30 from them. And so they sort of delicately ask, and this is a true story, it was told to me by an Atlanta guitar dealer. And so they sort of say, well, does he have a lock-up or a loft or whatever? And of course, about an hour later, they're looking at a collection of about 80 very, very nice guitars, probably worth approaching $2.5 million. And what I sort of was trying to understand is, the guy had lots of money. He could afford a couple $1 million worth of guitars. But why did he keep it secret? He didn't seem to be a guy who was afraid of his wife or whatever. What is it? And the more you talk to people, and that would be the question. Whenever I met anyone who owned a couple of guitars or played guitar, my first question was, how many guitars have you got? And even if it was one-on-one, there'd be that, well, probably like 6. And certainly if you're around a dinner table with the person's significant other, and I remember being around the dinner table with a friend of mine who's a professional musician, started out in prog rock and has been making his living.
He'd have quite a few guitars.
And I said, how many guitars have you got? And he said, and again, it's the classic thing. It's the slight rolling of the eyes, and it's almost like, what was the last number I actually said? And I remember him saying, about 10. And his wife said, so why have you got 15 cases then? And he said, well, they're not all full of guitars. He said, well, you keep empty guitar cases. He said, yes, they're my spare guitar cases. So we get through the line, and then a little bit later, how many guitars you got? He said, 30. I said, but 50. He said, I don't keep them all at home. I said, I've got a lockup. And some are at the dealer, and some are actually with friends, and some are on long-term loan. And the thing was, he's not even a guitarist. He's primarily a keyboard player, but he plays a bit of guitar. Anyway, so lots of stories about guitar. And so I started thinking, how is it that this fantastic instrument has got such a hold over people, this obsessive collecting? And it is different from any other instrument. There's, when you meet clarinet players or saxophone players, they might have a few, but they don't have the number that many guitarists have. And the guitar seems to have this ability to turn a player into an accidental collector. And they're obviously, you go onto YouTube, if you key in Billy Connolly, guitar collector, cracking video, this guy who's got a warehouse, and you go in room after room full of guitars. He goes into one room, literally stacked up sideways, and it's a biggish room, about the size of your showroom here, completely wall to ceiling of Fender Coronados. A guitar that Fender still make. It's not like they're particularly rare. And he must have had 200, of which 50 were the same colour. And you can say, well, he's a bit ill, isn't he, or something. But it's quite normal for people to have enormous collections. And it's this sort of obsessive nature and also the secretive nature of it. So I wanted to understand a bit about that. And that then led me to sort of try and understand sort of how did the guitar sort of somehow become the instrument that it is today, the incredibly important instrument. It's iconic. It democratized music making, more than any other instrument. It's it has an impact on social history, civil rights. Certainly, if you look at America, on politics, on the economy, on the way that society developed. So I sort of decided, well, actually, there's a bigger story here.
Went down the rabbit hole and just kept on
exactly,
digging.
And that's why it's taken me 5 years. And I've tried to do I started doing some original research because I didn't just want to. I mean, I've got a very, very large library of guitar books and music books, mainly guitar books. I've got about a 2-metre wall, and a lot of it is guitar porn. And I love a bit of guitar porn. That thing of lovely, beautiful, glossy pictures with a few words. And I knew I didn't want to write that. I didn't want a book that just had pictures of guitar. If you want to see pictures of guitars, A, you can buy those, and B,
you can go to the TNAG website.
Or you can go to your website and draw to your heart's light. I'd be very interested to know how many people are viewing it at 2 a.m. in the morning. Anyway, so I sort of decided that I wanted to find out a bit more. In fact, funnily enough, as I came in this morning, I looked at the TNAG logo, with the profiles of guitar, and we all sort of take it for granted that there are parlour guitars and then double O's and triple O's and obviously jumbos and dreadnoughts and the archtop and electric. But why?
How and where?
Why and where did they come from? Yeah. And there is there's a very easy sort of linear answer, which is it's all about louder. If the modern, what I call the modern steel strung acoustic guitar flat top, if it started off in the 1850s, and we know that Martin in their catalogue, and Martin have got obviously a pivotal role to play. Without Martin, the guitar wouldn't have developed in a way. It wasn't just the fact that they invented X bracing, and they invented it sort of quite early on. But they did.
It was the artists that they were getting involved.
Yeah, so exactly. Well, is it chicken and egg? Is it? Does music influence literally the shape and size of the guitar, or is it the other way around? Does the guitar influence the sort of music? Mm-hmm. And I was trying to understand that and almost like join the dots. And this sort of thing, where it's all about louder. So you start with a parlour guitar, and then they get slightly bigger and bigger, and then eventually you get to the dreadnought, and then the resonator guitar, sort of proto-electric amplified guitar. Then you get the electric guitar, and that's it. Well, yes, you can write that story, and you could say, okay, it's all about the search for louder to be able to play to bigger audiences, and to sell more tickets. And to have the guitar heard above the other instruments in the band. It is that, but it isn't quite as linear as that. And things happen for different reasons. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to sort of take all those profiles and say, well, why? Why? If you're watching this, you probably know quite a lot about guitars. So you probably know that the OM was designed by Martin in the 20s. It was a commission from a banjo player called Perry Bechtel, who was actually played in a jazz band. He wanted a guitar that he could play, because in the early days, jazz bands, the strung fretted instrument was a banjo. Mm-hmm. That was it. It was a rhythm instrument, effectively. Mm-hmm. But he wanted a guitar that would allow him to get that silky, smooth sound that was coming into dance band music in the 30s. And he commissioned Martin to build him a guitar with a longer neck and a narrower neck, a sort of faster neck. And so the OM comes along.
So that's very much music influencing.
It was, except, of course, that it wasn't a great guitar for the dance band. I mean, Perry Bechtel was a little bit of a con man. He suggested to Martin that, build me one of these and I will recommend it to all my many friends in East Coast dance bands, which to me is a bit like, give me one of these guitars for nothing, please, and I'll recommend it. He barely used it. It never caught on because the archtop had arrived, and archtop was the orchestra jazz guitar. Mm-hmm. But actually it got picked up by Western swing players, people like Roy Rogers, the cowboy, because it was sort of... it had the right sort of sound, it was a bit glossy and glitzy, but it very quickly came out of the Martin catalogue. They stopped making the OM, and it sort of became the triple O with a longer neck. And that would have been the end of the OM had there not been, in the 60s, a lively interest in Greenwich Village in New York in ragtime music. And lots of the people, Dave Van Ronk and the New Lost City Ramblers, were ragging up tunes, playing in a ragtime style. And a guy called Eric Schoenberg, and who's still alive, and his cousin David Laidman decided they wanted to transcribe all of the Scott Joplin piano roll tunes onto guitar. An incredibly difficult task because they're very complex tunes. And Eric Schoenberg decided that he was playing a 0045, that the old OMs were better, slightly longer string length, and just a better sound. It's easier to play for him. And he promoted the OMs. And now, virtually all of your makers make OMs. Mm-hmm. And it required Schoenberg to actually bring it back and actually bring it to the attention of Martin. He actually got Martin, it was Schoenberg and Dana Bourgeois, when Dana was Eric's repair guy, who made that first reproduction of an OM with a cutaway, because that was unique. And then he managed to persuade Martin to actually make them for him. And it was the right person at the right time. Martin were in a fairly slack period. Chris Martin had just arrived, and they were ready to try anything. And it was quite a conservative company, so it needed someone like Chris Martin and Dick Boak to actually say, yeah, we'll give it a whirl, and to allow another luthier, Bourgeois and Schoenberg, to come in and voice tops. T.J. Thompson, the famous repair guy, he was the one who actually made all the bridges, because the view was that Martin weren't capable of making authentic bridges, etc., etc. So it's stories like that I really found fascinating.
But that's the amazing thing about the book is you have this historical sort of it's almost every other chapter in it. There's a historical thing, but it's this travel log as well that I wanted to get. So you've started off with the bespoke instrument. We won't say who the luthier is. We'll let people find that out.
And it's a fabulous guitar. When it finally arrived, it was great. It was a bit of a long berth.
Yeah, and very funny. There is I think there's a lot of our customers will really enjoy this book because I get it all the time. As soon as the guitar is ordered, it's like, okay, so how long is it going to take exactly? And creating a piece of art, which essentially they are. Great. I always say, just greatness takes a day. It takes a long time. It doesn't take a day. But so this travel log, that was the kind of missing link for you with this book, wasn't it? That was the thing that really, when you thought, okay, I'm going down this road and I'm going to start.
Yeah, what I wanted to. So I've done a lot of desk research, and I say I've got lots and lots of books. I've read all those. History of Martin, history of Guild, history of Gibson, etc., etc. And I've done my fair share of drooling over pictures of rare Martins and rare Gibsons and whatever. But actually, an author friend of mine said, "You've just got to go out and talk to people. Go over to America, because it's essentially an American story." And we might come on and talk a little bit later about why isn't there really a sort of a substantive British guitar industry.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
But let's talk about that later. But so I knew I wanted to go to America. In fact, what I wanted to do was follow the journey of the guitar, because the guitar essentially comes from Europe, goes to the East Coast, and so I thought, well, everything's been written, and I just looked at my bookcase. But my friend had said, go over there, talk to people, because conversations lead to conversations. And so I decided to do a road trip, and it's
true that, sorry to interrupt you, but it's true that you went there with one appointment. You got on the plane, you went there with one appointment, and then from that one appointment, the journey sort of begins.
Absolutely.
Which I love so much.
Well, my friend had recommended, he said, don't overbook it.
Yeah.
Just because what you'll find, and I did find this, is you'll talk to someone, and they'll say, you should actually talk to my good friend, my very good friend, X. And in fact, what they're doing is they're acting as a gatekeeper. They're seeing whether or not are you real, are you just sort of a tourist or some joke or jerk. And so you get a little bit of screen and say, let me make this phone call and come and see this guy. And I went on my own, again, at the recommendation of my friend, because I knew that things were going to lead to things. And if I'd gone with my partner, whilst I'd have had company and someone to chat to in the evening, I wouldn't have been as flexible. And in fact, I was on the road for about 2 months. I wouldn't say I was living in a car. I did actually. I'm a bit too old to live in a car, but I did sleep in the car once. But I went to America, did the Stations of the Cross of actually vintage guitar dealers in America. The Mandolin Brothers and Urmanovs and Crandalls and whatever, and that was fascinating. Ended up every guitar shop I went into, as I got to the front door, because I knew I had two custom-built guitars coming to London, which I'm not totally certain I'd actually mentioned to my wife that they were coming. Maybe it had slipped my mind. But I said, every time I went into a guitar store, I said, I do not need to buy another guitar. John, do you? No, I do not need another guitar. So I lasted about 3 days. I went into a guitar store in New York, and sitting there was my birth year Martin Single 18 in really, really nice condition, not at all expensive, of course, and I ended up buying it. And I thought, actually, it'd be nice to have a guitar to play, and the first thing I'm going to take it home to Martin. So from New York, I drove to Nazareth, spent a few days at the Martin Guitar Company, met a lot of people, which was great, and then meandered my way down through the Appalachians, Nashville, Memphis, round the whole of the Delta. And the Delta, by the way, is not the river delta. The delta is the flat alluvial floodplain where cotton grows really easily. It is where the Mississippi runs down, but the delta is a long way away from the sea. And then meandered my way down the delta, then turned round across Texas, through into Mexico, and then I ended up in Northern California.
Good trip.
But I just took it as it came. And along the way, so I met a relative of Earl Scruggs, the banjo player, if you like, the key bluegrass banjo player.
Had you been to many of these places?
No.
Because you do actually mention that you go to these places and your memory of childhood comes through, and and records that you loved as a kid, and you quote some songs. Yeah. And I just thought that was, you feel, and I think that again, readers will really feel the passion and relate to a lot of this.
Yeah, well, it is, if it doesn't sound a bit too prosaic, but it is the book's a love letter to the guitar, in essence. I mean, I've been playing guitar since I was 13, 14, and apart from a couple of periods where it sat at the back of the wardrobe because we were having children and I had a career that was sort of taking all my time, but then in the 90s I sort of fell in love again, back in love with the guitar, and that's really when I sort of started acquiring guitars. The journey, I mean, I've been to New York lots of time on business, but again, it's that freedom of not having a diary, not having an agenda, not having to be anywhere. I had one meeting booked, as you mentioned, at the University of Mississippi. Has got an amazing blues archive, and I had made an appointment. That was the one appointment I had with the guy who ran the blues archive, which was like 2.5 weeks hence. So I had sort of all the time in the world to follow my nose. But I sort of one morning I think it was the first morning I got up and went to Washington Square. I was on my way to Bleecker Street, to where Umanoff's guitar, sadly no longer there. It closed. Matt Umanoff closed the store after being in Greenwich Village, being the guitar repair guy for Dylan and Dave Van Ronk and Joni and all that lot. And I remember walking across Washington Square, and only when you start digging around. I mean, there were riots in Washington Square. Washington Square from the 50s onward, there used to be folk music in Washington Square at the weekend, and it was a bit boho. There were it was one of the first places in New York where gay couples could openly walk around together hand in hand. It's the whole thing with like music and poetry and all that malarkey. And then a new councillor came into New York City who didn't like all the beatniks there, and they banned musical instrument playing in Washington Square. It had been a tradition for 15 years. And there were riots, there were protests. They arrested this kid who played alto harp one Sunday morning, and he was banged up in jail, and they had a funeral for the end of free music and live music. And in the end, the mayor sort of intervened and allowed permits again. But you still needed a permit to play in Washington Square. And you sort of walk through those places and you've got that knowledge in your head, and suddenly it comes alive. And, you know, I was in tears so many times on this journey. I mean, the time I actually cried was, I was in Northern California and I was sitting in a chair opposite Dave Crosby, playing Dave Crosby's D45. Wow. And we were chatting, and I said, "This is lovely." He said, "Yep, that's the guitar I played at Woodstock." Oh. And you think,
wow, that's amazing.
This is the guitar he played Wooden Ships on. And then he picked up the guitar and retuned it and played a song. And I had no idea that was going to happen. And you know, I went to Clarksdale, which is sort of they call it the sort of the golden buckle of the Cotton Belt. It was the wealthiest town in Mississippi. It's where all the cotton used to come into. But of course, there's so much to do with Mississippi. It's both the wealthiest and the poorest. And because while slavery may have ended, sharecroppers were still actually tied into working for virtually no money. But that's where Robert Johnson learned to play guitar from Son House. It's where the Crossroads is, and they make a sort of big deal of it. But again, I was having a coffee in Oxford, Mississippi, which is where the university is. I chat to this guy in the coffee queue. He says, you come meet my good friend. So I meet this guy, Dickie Scruggs, the richest man in Mississippi. He's a lawyer, and he did lots and lots of court actions on behalf of people with cancer and tobacco and asbestosis. He was doing class actions. I introduced him, and he said, the thing you've got to know about Dickie is he's the wealthiest man in Mississippi, but he's been in prison for 9 years. So I end up sitting outside hearing his not life story. He didn't actually say very much. His friend told most of the story. He literally tried to bribe a judge, and he was wiretapped. The judge was wiretapped. The judge had allegedly been quite well known for taking bribes, and Dickie had lots of money, allegedly. No, he had lots of money. He allegedly gave money to the judge, and he goes to prison for 9 years. But of course, I'm chatting to him, and Dickie says, where are you off to next? I'm off to Clarksdale. You've got to go and see Bill Luckett, our friend. He's the mayor. So in the end, I drive down to Clarksdale, get to the hotel. There's a note, not from the mayor, but from Libby Ray Watson. It says, my brother-in-law says, if you're the English guy my brother-in-law just met, come and see me tonight for a drink. I'm playing in the bar at XYZ. So I go and see Libby Ray. So she's a blues guitarist, happens to be related to the very, very wealthy Dickie Scruggs. And she had met Furry Lewis, Sam Chayman of the Mississippi Shakes. She's in her 60s now, but when she was 18, she did a road trip meeting all these blues guys and played guitar and taught, and they taught her guitar, etc., etc. Amazing characters. That sort of came out of standing in a coffee line.
Amazing.
And then, so everything sort of rolls from there. So that was the trip. And from having nothing planned, I end up sitting in a field talking to Dave Crosby, playing his D45 that he played at Woodstock. And you think this is unreal.
So it's kind of there's three parts of the story, isn't there? There, like we were saying, there is the travel log, there's the historical part, and then there's these two bespoke instruments. And the way they all sort of form into one narrative is that's what makes it so fun, and also it keeps it in a way, it keeps it quite exciting because it's moving chapter by chapter.
Yeah, I've tried to sort of interleaf it in a way that the history of the guitar, it isn't linear, so you sort of have to play around with it a bit because things don't happen sort of, and then they make the single O, and then they develop the double O, and then they develop the triple O. It doesn't sort of work like that. But what I wanted to do was, so I've sliced the last 100 years into decades. Mm-hmm. So if you look at 20s is the jazz age. Funnily enough, the guitar wasn't massively popular in the 20s. The banjo was the stringed fretted instrument, the tenor banjo and the plectrum banjo. But it sort of lays the roots of what the guitar's going to do. But of course, what happens in the 20s is the explosion in recording music, in the record. Mm-hmm. And essentially the most important thing is that the record companies go out into the South and Appalachia and they record people in the field. They've got an ulterior motive, which is they don't want to pay copyright for records of tunes that have already been published in, or either recorded or published already on Broadway. So they want local players. And that's when you get these sort of the recording machines go around, the travelling recording lathes go around and record people in hotel rooms, which is where Robert Johnson was recorded. Interesting, Robert Johnson comes really late. I mean, because it's virtually the end of acoustic country blues because the electric has sort of started happening. So I try and slice it. I do slice it decade by decade, but then I interweave it with the travelogue because each place I arrive at tends to be, so when I'm in Clarksdale, I'm relating to what's happening in the Delta in the 30s. And then also woven in is the love-lorn story of is it going to be made, is it not going to be made guitar? Mm-hmm. So that's how it sort of interleaves. So in terms of, for the reader, I know you sort of read it sort of in a linear fashion, which is how it's been constructed. I've taken a lot of care to weave it that way so you can read it as a continuous read. But if you just want to read the historical bit, you can. Or if you just want to read the narrative, you can read it as a narrative.
Absolutely.
And dip back. So if you're really, if you're interested in the 60s and why isn't there a British guitar industry? Mm-hmm. Then you can just go to that bit and read about that and not bother with the 20s or 30s.
So what are the plans for the book now?
Okay, so we're at sort of virtually final proof stage.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the illustration, so it's...
God, we haven't even talked about the illustrations. I mean, they are so beautiful, the illustrations.
Well, when I started writing, I thought, I don't really want to have pictures of lovely guitars in, as I say. There's lots of books that do that. If that's your thing, and it is my thing, then other books are available. And obviously there's websites. But what I wanted to do was pick a notable person from each decade. And I was chatting there's a fantastic illustrator called Drew Christie. He does a lot of work for New York Magazine and Atlantic. And he also does a lot of work for Fretboard Journal. And he does a sort of slightly naif style. And I gave him a call, and I didn't ever think he'd have any. He now makes films. He mainly makes animated films with T-Bone Burnett. Really cracking little films, little stories of music history. And I explained what I was doing, and he said, yeah, well, if next time you're in town, come and see me. Well, he lives on an island off of in Puget Sound, which I don't tend to sort of scoot by that often. So I managed to arrange to go and see Jason Costel in Arizona, and from there I then scooted up to Seattle, saw my good friends at the Fretboard Journal, and then across to see Drew. And he was really enthused, a real fan of English folk music. And he said, yeah, I'd love to do it. But the deal we struck was I wasn't going to just commission him and say, look, just draw this person. So I gave him, each chapter's got 3 or 4 different people in it. So you pick who you want to draw, who sort of takes you. So he did these beautiful illustrations, 12 illustrations, which are sort of hand-coloured. And so when we come to produce the book, so the book's going to be artisan bound. It's a limited edition. I spoke to a number of publishers. What they all want is guitar porn. They want books which have got lots of glossy pictures of very nice guitars with a few words in, and
which is great.
Absolutely great.
Absolutely.
But I sort of felt that
but not right for what you're.
It's not what I want. It's not what I wanted to do. And in a way, if you enjoy the sort of longer read that, say, Fretboard Journal gives you, a sort of more in depth, assumes a level of knowledge rather than saying C.F. Martin is a guitar maker. And blah, blah. So I decided what I wanted to do was produce a book that physically could sit alongside a Greenfield or acoustic guitar. And I'm imagining the sort of people who buy this book have got a collection of guitars, and they want something that's really, really nice. So it's going to be artisan bound, hand bound. I'm going to produce 500. The illustrations all get hand stuck in, called tipped in, on watercolour paper, and then it comes with a set of the illustrations, coloured and printed, that you could frame or keep or whatever in a very nice sort of slipcase, etc. And that's going to take, it's about 3 to 4 months to get them made. So we're at the point where we're about to sort of send it off for typography, and so the plan is that we should have them by August. So very kindly he said, committing it to film, so you now have to do it. You've very kindly offered to have a launch event here in September. So I think the plan will be, the books will be ready in August, ready for sort of pre-Christmas. But effectively, you're going to very kindly host a launch event here, and you will have a exclusive dibs on the first 50. And then they'll effectively be launched at Christmas, or be available for sort of then. It seems a long way away, but it isn't.
They'll come by very
really
quickly,
and as you say, things take me to do it nicely, because all the illustrations are printed separately on art paper. They've all got to be cut, and then they've got to be literally glued in. Every book has 12 illustrations glued in by hand. It's then hand bound, and then the slipcase is handmade, and it goes into another case. So it's a nice piece without being
of course,
glossy over the top with gold leaf. It's just I wanted to make a very nice thing, that if you've got a guitar collection, it's the sort of thing that is going to look very nice next to.
Yeah, which is why I thought it's such a great idea to do this interview, because most people would do an interview once the book is launched. It's like, here's the book, But because we've been talking for quite some time about it, and obviously having read some of the notes before getting a draft. You call it a draft?
Proof.
Yes, I've been so excited about the book that we have decided together that we're going to add you into our notes, the TNAG notes section of our newsletter, just to give little snippets. They won't necessarily be snippets of the book, but there'll be certain stories and things that you didn't quite fit in, but it will give readers an idea of your writing style and also where the sort of read that they're going to get.
Yeah,
when they get
I mean, there are about 4,
which is very funny. All I can say is it is so funny. One thing when I was reading, I was thinking, 'cause knowing you and knowing how charismatic you are, and when I was reading, I was thinking to myself, you've got to do an audiobook because it's just some of the stories they honestly had me in tears with laughter.
And sometimes tears of frustration for them.
Absolutely.
And I think it does say a lot about. I mean, we know that makers like Greenfield and Coastal are so buttoned down. They are so together, and a lot of makers are like that. But I remember I spent the whole day with Jason, and it's very easy to spend the whole day with Jason. He was incredibly generous of his time. But he talks about many of his guitar making friends, and literally, it's like, I cannot believe it. I sort of said to him, okay, I'll do this for you, but providing you do that and you get the thing finished. And he said, and then a year later, he's like, I haven't quite got around to doing that yet because I was busy doing this. So I think anyone who's ever had a guitar made, the story of the making of the guitar, the misadventures, which has ended up with astonishing. But all my fault, to be honest, because the guy who made it for me.
But you changed it. At one point, we were balancing whether it was going to be a double O or it was going to be an OM, and we were going back and forth for a while. And you're like, no, I'm going with the double O. So,
But Jason was incredibly kind. So kind with his time and insight, and Jason sort of in the book. But so the plan is that. What I'm going to do is I've got about 4 or 5 stories. Some are the historical ones and some are sort of slightly more personal that I couldn't fit into the book that I'm going to sort of edit so that you can put onto the website. And I think the plan is that we'll sort of put them up March, April, May, June, one a month.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll start off by introducing the TNAG notes over the next few months, and once we've got the launch date in September, which hopefully we'll know within the next sort of few weeks, we'll get that onto the website. And we've got an exciting musician who's going to accompany you at the launch event, which is really great. You're going to be going through chapters of the book, and then we have. We're very excited to announce that we'll be getting an exclusive run of the books. So exclusive serial numbers, all signed by Mr. Johnson.
Although it will be possible to get rare unsigned copies if you're lucky.
John, that was so much fun.
Yeah, great.
Really Thank you so much. My hands are very cold. It's winter here.
It's cold down here.
It is cold down here. So for more information on the finest hand-built luthier instruments, then please do subscribe to our channel. But for more information on Mr. John Stubbings and this incredible book that is coming out very soon, The Devil Is In It, please do get in touch.
I'm off to play guitars.